Well, today I'm going to build a sign. I've been wanting to build a sign for my shop for some time, and it's going to be a very specific type of sign. I'm heading out to the scrap wood lumber pile because I'm out of proper framing wood. I checked through my shelving and I realized all the stuff that I have on hand is more for finishing. So I don't have any more framing lumber to do any major projects with. And even for the sign that I want to build, I really don't have the lumber for that. So thankfully I managed to find a couple of 2x8s in the scrap wood pile here. They look pretty rough and they're covered in paint and various things, but I think they'll work just fine for my purposes. Wanted to scrape the snow and dirt off them before I brought them into my shop, and here we have a little closer look at these. You can see they're quite chewed up on the edges. This is probably why I didn't use them in my summer project. I built a shed last summer, and most of the 2x8s I was using, I was putting on edge in terms of the framing, and so these probably wouldn't have sit well with the edges being chewed out as they were. Typically with most projects, I try to always purchase a little extra, a little more than you need, so that way if you do get pieces like this that are not suitable, you can use them for something else. So here I'm just measuring up the boards and checking what the straightest edges are, coming up with a plan on how I can break these down to build myself a sign. Whenever you're working with rough lumber like this and you're doing more decorative stuff, you really want to know the properties of the wood to make sure that you know what the straightest side is and if there's any curves or arcs or where the knots are and so forth. So my plan here is to take these boards and to rip them in 1.5 inch slices to begin. And that's going to give me some perfect square shaped boards because it's a 2x8, so that means it's 1.5 inches deep already. And so I'm going to cut it to be 1.5 inches wide, and of course it will maintain its length. So in my previous video, I walked through the process of building this table saw table that you see there, that workbench. It was a nice day outside to start a new project. So I ripped these boards down into these 1.5 inch strips. And I just like that camera shot. It's somewhat inspiring a little bit when I see wood like that. You just wonder what you can do with it, what you can build. I'm just checking the true on my miter saw here. I'm gonna pre-cut these boards to 45 degrees, and if they were longer, I could router them being full length, but figured this would make more sense for this specific project. Here I'm just measuring, trying to figure out the best geometry for this. Whenever you're cutting angle cuts like this, you need to make sure you know whether you want to measure from the inside of the angle or the outside, as that makes a big difference. think I wanted this thing to be roughly 4 feet long by 20 inches high. And so what I need now is a backing plate. So I want to secure that frame to a back plate, and it will just help with the integrity of the sign. And it will also allow me to add a decorative background to it. So the backing plate, the plywood itself, is not going to be visible once the sign is done. So I'm not too worried about the paint and the stains that are on the plywood. Of course, any of the stuff that is sticking up like glue or whatever, I'll have to sand that down to make sure I have a nice smooth surface. So here's my final cut on the backing plate, and this will provide me the shape of the sign that I need. So now I'm just going to take my my sander and try to get all the rough stuff off so I have a nice smooth surface to work from. I'm grabbing some 60 grit sandpaper here. Whenever you're sanding, you want to make sure you have the level of grit you need to do the job in a decent amount of time. I always prefer to have my sander plugged into a vacuum or dust collection. It's a great way to keep the dust down from the air, and I find often when I do that, I don't have to wear like a breathing mask. Here I'm just showing you the sandpaper is a little messed up. That is from shellac that was on those boards, but now you can see they're nice and clean here. All right, time for some late night woodworking. One of my favorite things to do in the evenings, come out to the garage. It's nice and cold and crisp. The air is fresh. Checking out a new drill press I got here. I'm checking my measurements here on my frame compared to the backing plate. Now I'm going to take those other pieces that I had left over from the 2x8s that I ripped up, and I'm going to rip them down to some smaller slats, I guess you could say. And some of the pieces were long enough I needed to open the garage door, even though it was fairly crisp that evening. So here's all those other pieces ripped down into, they're probably about 3/8 of an inch deep. And that will give me what I need to build the background, the backdrop of my sign. Whenever you're out in a cold evening like this, you need to make sure you got a good hot cup of coffee or tea. Help keep yourself warm. I often enjoy working late into the night. Plus, afterwards, you sleep really well too. So, my garage isn't sealed that great, so it definitely lets in the fresh, cold air. One of the challenges of working in a cold environment like this is your fingers start moving a little slower, and they start to go a little numb from the cold. So it's always a balancing act between trying to keep your fingers warm and trying to stay productive. I'm using these little angle clamps here to set the geometry for the frame, and they'll pinch those two boards down into a perfect 90-degree angle and hold it solid, so that I can glue them and fasten them to the backing plate. And once that's done, then I don't have to worry about the geometry of the sign because the backing plate will hold everything in place. I believe I cut the angles not at a pure 45 degrees, but maybe like a 45.5 or 46 degrees. And what that does is it makes sure that your outward corners are pressed together very well, but sometimes your inside corners then will have a little bit of a gap in them, and using these clamps just helps to overcome that. Well, it is pretty crisp out today, but it's actually really nice in the shop here. So I'll just show you the vehicles here. You can see they're all covered in snow. So anyway, the plan today is to take the sign that I'm building here and get these, get the frame all structured. And basically I want to get that brad nailed and glued, let that dry, and then I'll be ready to router the framing components on this sign. And by having it glued and brad nailed, when the router goes around the 90s, I'm gonna get a really nice effect. And so I always prefer to router this kind of stuff assembled as opposed to disassembled. The only time you can router it disassembled is if you router the board as it is in its full length. And then what you can do is you can use your miter saw to cut your angles on that, and then that will work also. But I don't have like a fine blade on my miter saw, and so I prefer to cut the angles first and then do the routering once it's in its assembled state. So it just it works out a little cleaner that way. So all right, here we go. So there we go. We have assembled the frame, and I've routered the edges on this. This a little better so you can see it. And those will show up better too. Once you sand this down, you stain it. Some of the grooves and some of the design of the router bits will really come to life there. So, all right, now on to next steps.
Any particular piece you're playing?
Okay, so I got the slats for the sign shellacked, and I used that Havana Brown alcohol ink to do that. Now I'm actually using the same color, same process, although I'm just using more of the same Havana Brown color to make the stain for the edging of the frame for the sign here. And I believe I put on 2 or 3 coats, and it turned out pretty nice. I'm just going over this with some sandpaper, try to get down some of the roughness, and then I'm also using a rag here that I am putting some more, this is isopropyl alcohol on, and I'm using that to rub down the finish as well. And that's a great way of getting rid of any thick spots in the finish. And it's also another way of giving your work something called that hand-rubbed look. So you can see here it has that hand-rubbed look to it. So now what I'm doing is I am custom cutting those slats to fit inside the sign. And I'm just making sure everything fits really good before I do my final assembly on that. I didn't put the slats in at this point in any specific order. And so if you look closely, you can see there's some thicker ones and some thinner ones. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to rearrange those slats so that there's a symmetry in regard to which ones I put in which order. I also want to space out where some of the joints are in the slats as well, so they're spread out a little bit. I'm putting some glue down here, and the goal is to glue them and brad nail them in place, so hopefully they should never move or fall out. Sometimes if you just have glue or if you just have brad nails, your work can be compromised. But if you glue and brad nail wood together, then it should last a long time. Brad nails tend to fasten your work so that it cannot flex very much, and glue holds that work together. If you just have glue and your work is allowed to flex over time, then the glue will come undone. So earlier I cut these boards to fit inside the frame, and what this will allow me to do is really pinch down the slats in the back of the frame, and that should help that glue to set really well. The other thing this will allow me to do is to brad nail it in place without fear of the brad nails pushing those slat boards off the frame. So if I can have them pinched down real hard like that, then I have no concerns there. The trick with this process, of course, was that the slats were fairly thin, and I also needed the brad nails to hold them in place. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to put the brad nails in on an angle, enough of an angle, because if I went straight through with the brad nails, they'd probably stick out a little bit from the slats, and that would be no good. I'm bringing in the sign to the warmer side of the garage and going to let it sit in here for a day or so that the glue can set properly. One of the concerns with gluing something in a frozen garage is if the glue freezes before it sets, what will happen is the glue could expand because it does have some liquid in it. And when liquids expand, of course when liquids freeze, then they expand, and that could have some consequences to the work. I noticed after it had dried that a little bit of glue came out in one portion of the sign, which was unfortunate because that meant I'd have to sand this out now. And that was a bit tricky, trying to figure out the right tools to get that glue out of there. And I figured using files worked out to be the best solution anyway. I used the very last of my Bullseye seal coat. It's a de-wax shellac base. It's I believe they use like an ethyl alcohol or a denatured alcohol and mixed with shellac. So I used the very last of what I had on hand and to kind of reseal this after I had filed it down a little bit. So I got my letters in. I had ordered these through a local laser cutting company. And now what I'm doing is I'm actually mixing my own shellac, because that bullseye seal coat, I couldn't find that anywhere. I even reached out to the company. They were really good. They called me back and just mentioned that they are sold out of that all over the place. And I asked why, thinking maybe they were having issues with shipping or resources of that kind of nature. And the fellow on the other line mentioned he didn't know exactly why, but he figured that it has something to do with the high volume of kind of home rental projects that have been taking place over the last few months. With more people at home, there's just apparently more projects underway. So that was the answer that was given to me. So I'm taking some of this shellac here. I ordered this off Amazon, and I've kind of been wanting to do this for a while, but this is the first project I'm going to mix my own shellac with. I'm going to mix my own shellac with. And so what I did is I put about 1/8 in the bottom of this glass jar here, and I'm going to fill the rest up with isopropyl alcohol, because it is the only type of alcohol you can find on the market that is legal to buy, that's like a pure alcohol. And so I wasn't entirely sure how this was going to work. In the end, it actually worked excellent. So I will probably use this method going forward. So I'm taking some alcohol inks here. This is a brand, I think it's called Panata. And I have used these in the past. And what I really like about working with these alcohol inks is that I have a whole rainbow of colors I showed you earlier. And what I can do is I can blend these colors to literally come up with any color tone that I'm looking for. So for my letters for this project, I really would like to have red letters. And so I start with a magenta here. And I'm going to add a little bit of purple just to kind of round it out and to make it a little deeper red. But I'm also going to have to add yellow to that. Apparently yellow mixed with magenta is what is going to give you your red color. Now it's a little bit trippy when you're mixing colors in shellac, because shellac has its own color as well. And the shellac color is almost like a type of orangey brown. And so you can see that the color that comes out of the spoon on the lid there is a very bright pink, whereas what's in the mix appears to be like almost a sludgy kind of greenish brown. So that was a bit trippy for me to work through that process, but basically what I realized is what you see in the glass cup is not exactly representative of what comes out. I'm just peeling off I had some stickers on these letters here. And so I'm peeling those off. And then I'm going to start my staining process. At this point, I did add a little more yellow to the stain, and so you see it coming out. It's almost kind of a pinky orange color initially. I believe I ended up adding a little more magenta and a little more yellow to kind of deepen the red tone of the stain. But since I knew I was going to be doing multiple layers, I wasn't too worried about it at this point. So this is what the first layer looks like right here. And this is a few more layers later. It's starting to look a little deeper in its red tone. And again, the shellac base that I'm using, it looks like kind of a gross looking brown color. So it's really bizarre that such a beautiful red tone, or in this case kind of a pink tone, comes out of it. So I give these a quick hand rub because they are kind of delicate letters, and I've been doing this process each time. I put a layer on, and then I give it a quick hand rub, and with a sanding block here, and then I put another layer on. I just go over them with a microfiber cloth to try to get any of the grit off them, and that prepares them for the next layer of shellac stain here. I discovered a little trick with the paintbrush. I keep the paint brush in a plastic jar there that I keep. It's just an isopropyl alcohol, so all I do is I take it out and I kind of shake the excess alcohol off, and then I can begin staining with it. And it means that I don't have to worry about cleaning the paintbrush and doing that kind of thing.
Jehovah never sleeps. He's guarding you and me. Well, Jehovah never sleeps. He's guarding you and me. Well, his promise of protection is one he's gonna keep. Jehovah never sleeps. Well, Jesus is the light in the darkness of the night. Well, Jesus is the light in the darkness of the night. Well, he's God's beacon of protection, showing us the way. Jesus is the light. Well, your loving arms are beneath us, your wings are overhead. I won't worry about being defeated. I'm gonna trust in Jesus instead. Well, your spirit is the shade in the heat of the day. Well, your spirit is the shade in the heat of the day. It's a chill for the darkness, blinding the way. Your spirit is the shade. Your loving arms are beneath us, your wings are overhead. I won't worry about being defeated. I'm gonna trust in Jesus instead. Jehovah never sleeps. He's guarding you and me. Jehovah never sleeps. He's guarding you and me. He's God, keeping us protection. Hallelujah. Jesus is the light in the darkness of the night. Jesus is the light in the darkness of the night. He's God's beacon of protection, showing us the way. Jesus is the light. His loving arms are beneath us, and his wings are overhead. I won't worry about being defeated. I'm gonna trust in Jesus instead. I'm gonna trust in Jesus instead.
Hey, thanks for checking out my video. Jesus saves. This is the truth of my life. Scripture tells us that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever would believe on him, that being Jesus, would not perish, but have everlasting life. And so the gospel is good news. God loves you, and it's God's heart to save you. And I encourage you to look into Jesus if you haven't before. We're living in a time where there's a lot of bad news, and people are realizing that man is not in a position to save man. Only God can do that.
I'm gonna trust in Jesus instead. I won't worry about being defeated.
So yeah, building your own sign is fun. I enjoyed this process. You may be wondering what the price of something like this would be if you wanted to do something like this for your own home. Of course, all the lumber was just scrap lumber, and the lettering itself was, let's say maybe $150 to $200. So I went and purchased some white aspen and a 1x8, and went and got these letters laser cut by a company, and then I did the shellacking myself. So and the colors turned out really nice. I really like that. So yeah, be blessed. Hit the like and subscribe and all that kind of jazz, and make sure to share this video with your family and friends. Till next time.